Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back in with you guys for another show. Oh God! First of all, you can tell from my reaction how excited I am about this. First off, a huge apologies for earlier on. Obviously, we would usually do this show live straight after the game, but we couldn't do that because for some reason YouTube decided to be about as effective as our front line or as our manager is, or whatever Arsenal sort of comparison you'd like to put in. So that's why that we didn't go live immediately, and I can only apologise for that. I have to say that I've been scrolling back through the chat box, and I'm so sorry that so many people didn't see on Twitter. If you follow us on Twitter at the Gooner Talk TV, I always say when we go live and when we're going live and stuff like that. And if you want any updates as to why it may be not working or it's not happening, please do go follow us over there on at the Gooner Talk TV, and it will have all the information for you. But thank you ever so much for tuning in this evening to talk about what was Arsenal winning, drawing 1-1 away at Vitoria in Portugal. Let's see what some of you guys are saying. Wet Pants the Gooner says Emery out. Obviously, yes. Tyrone Irving says thanks for dropping in, Tom. Just the therapy I needed. Don't worry, Tyrone. We're going to go into plenty about that. So let's talk about it. Arsenal setting up against a side in Portugal that struggled. I don't think they even beat the 13th side in Portugal over the weekend. And before they played us in the home leg, of course, they hadn't even scored in this competition. But there's a few things tactically that I want to go over and talk about. But don't worry, we're going to get into all of that. Good evening, Ashwin. Kofi says Banter FC would be United. AS says, can I wake up to the news that Freddie is taking over temporarily tomorrow morning? Ross Taylor says the players have given up. There's no confidence. Joseph says people don't use Twitter. It's a crap hole. Oh no, you can't say that. It's the source of all good in the world. I'm of course joking. Great show, says Pistol Pete. Thank you ever so much for tuning in, mate. Greg says good morning, Tom. Yes, I'm sorry that you've had to tune in so late for this one, mate. Fabrizio says, what do you think about Bielsa as a replacement for Emery? Oh, Bielsa at Arsenal. I mean, do I dare even contemplate that right now? Let's talk about the game, though. So Arsenal go into this game, and I have to say, I, obviously, being a teacher, finished work quite early in the afternoon. I was home by just after, it was about 3:30, and I'm not gloating, by the way. And so sat down to sort out, and I was sorting out dinner at the same time that I was watching the game, had the old chopping board on the table in front of me, getting everything ready while watching it. And I was able to do that because what I was presented in front of me was one of the most mind-numbingly boring, monotonous, lacking in any sort of fizz or fun that I've ever sort of, I don't want to say ever witnessed, but one of the worst games I've ever had to sit through as an Arsenal fan. Now, these Europa League games, knowing that we are going to get through the group stage, we know that that's going to happen. That's very obvious, but it's the fact that we're not even fun to watch in these games. You look at the start of the group stage when we played Standard Liège and we absolutely battered them. That was at least fun watching Martinelli rip these teams apart, but all the creativity and just a bit of the dynamism and the bit more energy has sort of just been drained and sapped out of not just the first team, but the whole sort of energy and want of this. I mean, I'll just wang in the chat just, but I regret the $2.99 I paid to watch this game. I'm so sorry that you had to sit through that, Wang. I really do. Vamos says Bielsa is a top coach. Joseph says it was very boring 5 minutes and I stopped watching a very bad game. Nico says can't take away from the quality Vitoria have, but we don't look a threat. So I'm going to throw up on the screen for you now. Which hopefully will pop up just now. It will. This is Vitoria's passing map from the game. You might have seen some of these posted round on Twitter, which, by the way, we're now live streaming on Twitter. So at the Gooner Talk TV, if you want to see us on Twitter. These are the 230 of the 313 successful passes that were made in the game. Now, what you should notice about this is that notice the arrows that are going into the box. Notice how many there are, because I'm looking in there and I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. About 16 passes going into the box. Now, I'm going to show up for you. This is Arsenal's. Now, you will notice, first of all, that there is a hell of a lot more passes, a hell of a lot more. But what you will then notice is that you can see where these passes are not happening, and that is the box. I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 passes, and the only pass that was successful, which are the blue passes, by the way, that went into the box was the one which we score from, which is shown in yellow, and that was a set piece. Now, me and Drew were chatting in our WhatsApp group before or during the game, and we put this up there, and it was a discussion going on about Ceballos, which I'm going to come on to in a minute. But we were talking about how the fact we're so reliant on playing down in wide positions. Now, we did that with our wing backs, with Tierney and Maitland-Niles, and that was always going to be the plan when you play with wing backs, is they were going to get up. But what's so weird is that we're so heavily reliant on the wings, but we hardly ever put the ball in the box. It's a really odd thing to be looking at. That yes, it's a very impressive passing map in terms of the accuracy. There's a hell of a lot of a blue compared to anything red, but the passes that are successful are horrific. You look at where they are. They're across the field. They're up into wide positions. There's nothing going through centrally. There's nothing that's incisive. What's even more horrific is I can see a lot of red passes in our own half in dangerous positions because we've put ourselves under pressure, especially down on that bottom left-hand corner. You can see there on the right-hand side where it's Maitland-Niles' area, who I thought was, again, quite poor today. But what I want to talk about this specifically is actually coming on to mentioning Ceballos. Now, I saw a couple of tweets, and in fact, I put a tweet out. I don't know if I can actually find my tweets that I put out on here. It is somewhere. I will find it. I put the tweet out earlier on about Ceballos, about how on earth, you can follow us, by the way, go check us out. Nearly at 15,000. Well, I didn't even check that. Nearly at 15K. Come follow us. In terms of, there we are. We're live. In terms of the tweet that I put out, it was to do with, here we go. So I think Ceballos has arguably been the biggest victim of Emery's passive and turgid game at Los Blancos, and in particular Betis. The Spaniard was someone who loved being that creative driver of the ball, but how can someone so expressive do anything when we pass like this? Now, this was just before Ceballos had been brought off in the game. How is someone who is supposed to be so expressive, such a leader in the middle of the park of trying to create and dictate and conduct the play, how can someone be in the team with that skill set under a system that basically makes that style of play inept? Now, we're having a bit of a joke with Andy from the Gooners podcast, and he obviously likes to give me a little bit of grief about La Liga because people know about my love of La Liga. But my explanation about Ceballos is quite simply down to the fact that you've got someone there whose best game was against Burnley. Ceballos' best game was against Burnley by far. Now, what is it that's so funny about the fact that Ceballos' best game was against Burnley? Well, it's because it was his first start in the team. Before he'd had too much input from Emery, before too much had been coached into him, before he'd got used to the system that we're playing. And from that point on, Ceballos has declined incredibly, to the point that people are going, why on earth did we think he was so great? Why did we think that Ceballos was this person that we could not wait to get hold of from Real Madrid? Well, one, I wouldn't jump the gun too soon. If people are going out there tweeting Ceballos isn't really that good, then it's one of those very reactionary type of tweets or posts, and I wouldn't read into it too much because, trust me, Ceballos is a brilliant footballer. His technical ability is great. His eye for a great pass is very good. Yes, he's got a mistake on him. He's still quite young. But at the end of the day, if he's going to be playing in a system that is so passive and rigid and swollen in the midfield, where no passes are encouraged incisively, where we spend most of our time allowing our opposition to play the game that they want to play and to be as attacking and as creative as possible, then Ceballos is never going to be the best player in this system. If we have a manager that wants to play free-flowing football, be attacking, be protagonists, and actually take the game to the opponents, Ceballos will flourish. But in this side, you cannot guarantee in this system that Ceballos will perform well. Let's get some more of your comments. Willie1886 says, Tom, the players look so disinterested in the whole setup. Pepe is an epitome of that in today's game. Again, Pepe, I feel so sorry, because if you're watching Lille at the moment, I think it's Osimhen, the Nigeria, I believe he's Nigerian forward. They signed him this season basically as Pepe's replacement, but he's playing as a striker. And Osimhen is absolutely ripping it up in Liga. He scored against Valencia in the Europa League. It was a really, really good counter-attacking goal, and he is loving life there under their system, because it's a really, really good system that works, that encourages counter-attacking play, and it doesn't just sit back, hit teams on the counter in a way which is so boring to watch, but actually it's a little bit fun. And there's nothing fun about what we're seeing at Arsenal right now, and it is painful to watch. I want to go through some of Unai Emery's comments after the game, because every time I watch Unai Emery, and every time I watch and read through his press conferences, everything that I read it just frustrates the hell out of me. I'm just going to throw that off the screen quickly so you can see it. So here we go. This is what he said on the game. Please, I'm going to take a drink, so I'm drying up like hell. He says, good evening. In this competition, our objective is to be the first in the group, and we have 10 points, and we are first. We are going to play the next 2 matches to make sure of that position, and now we are going to prepare for the Leicester on Saturday. It's a new competition, and it is very important, but the analysis from this match, I think we worked hard and fought against a team who were very strong defensively and very organised. They play against us with 100% motivation and also with their supporters. Now, it's this bit that concerns me. They play against us with 100% motivation. He brings that up like it's a plus. He brings that up like it's not the norm, not what we should expect against a team. And that's why. Why would you not expect the opposition to play with 100% motivation, especially when they have to win? Because I'm not watching an Arsenal side that are playing with 100% motivation. I'm watching an Arsenal side right now that are struggling to work out what they actually need to do. Gabriel Martinelli had to come over a couple of times to the sidelines to get instructions from Emery because he didn't know what he wanted him to do. And he had to come back and get re-instructions again, not because he wasn't listening, not because he hasn't got coherent enough communication to be able to understand it, because he isn't sure, because he's confused. He doesn't know what is being asked of him. On conceding a late goal, our objective this evening was also to keep a clean sheet because we need to improve defensively and be strong in that moment. We are using each match to achieve that. We didn't do that this evening against Vitoria, but we are going to take that challenge against Leicester. In this competition, we are taking good results, scoring a lot of goals and not conceding a lot of goals. I think we conceded a couple of goals against this side at home. We use each match to improve and achieve points in each competition. We finished the match with only 1 point, but we continued in first in the group. And now we need to prepare for the match on Saturday. It's going to be different, and it's different competition. The same objective is to win, but above all, to improve defensively and continue to be strong. Offensively, to also have tactical situations that allow us to achieve chances. Again, I know that it's not his first language. I know that he's not the best communicator, but it just doesn't give us sort of that confidence. It doesn't inspire me at all. There was a really interesting comment on only having one shot on target. So he's asked a question about only having one shot on target. They are very defensive with big defensive structure. So what? So what if they're a defensive side? Create more. Be more protagonistic. Go out there and actually attack them. Just because a team is defensive, it doesn't mean that it's an excuse for only having one shot on target. That is not good enough. Just because you come up against Atletico Madrid, Juventus, and other big teams that have played them in their group this year, are not just going to sit back. Oh, they're a defensive side, so we're not going to get many shots. No, you go out there with the attitude to have even more shots and be more offensive and try and get at them. You don't just bow to the fact that that is their style and that is what they do. And I didn't really think Vitoria are that defensive, to be honest. Anyway, it's not easy because they were defending very deep and together, and to find and create small spaces was not easy against this team. We want to improve and also to continue in our way. How can we prepare the next match to be strong defensively and also create chances? How can we prepare the next match to be strong defensively? And also, is he asking us? Is he asking us? Because if you're asking me, I know how we can prepare to the next match to be strong defensively and create chances. Is that you play Ozil behind our best front three we've had in a long, long time. How about we try that? That's how you create with a lot of front line. And then maybe you go with 5 at the back. Maybe you try that for once instead of playing with what the system we're doing right now. But and you play with Bellerin and Tierney, not just one or the other, or you don't have to stick with Kolasinac because you're obsessed with him. Today, our objective was to continue to be the top of the group. A little disappointed not to win, but that point means we are still tied. It's just like grasp. I want to grasp onto any little thing I can get hold of. It just makes no sense. Also, Ceballos, yes, we are going to wait for analysis tomorrow. But at the beginning, I think it is a small injury. Well, that's positive. So let's get some more of your comments in here before I lose the will to live. Ashwin says Emery doesn't play to our strengths. He focuses on other teams' weaknesses. I just don't know how we can continue like this. He focuses on other teams' weaknesses, but he then comes out afterwards saying, well, they're really strong defensively. That is why we only have one shot on target. No, it doesn't correlate. It doesn't work. I feel your pain, says South London's finest B. Paul Avis says, I never thought I would dislike another manager, but Emery has just got my number one spot. Greg says, who believes we can beat, not draw, against Leicester this weekend? I really struggle to think we'll get anything decent against Leicester this weekend. Chris says, saw a stat where we've dropped 33 out of 54 points. Only gained 21 in the Premier League, winning 5 of the last 18. Results based on business. Can't say that this isn't a damning enough. Apparently, the structure, Vinay and Edu, and I don't know if Josh was there, but I know that Vinay and Edu, maybe Raul were there. I know Husfami was there, I think, today. But does that mean anything? I mean, they're watching every game. They know what's going on. They know very obviously what the fans are feeling. Are they going to change anything? I can't see it happening. I cannot see us making a change at this point in time. I didn't expect things to get this bad this quickly after last season. I thought the last season was a relative, I don't want to say success, but I thought it was a relative surprise that we managed to actually compete for the top 4 nearly to the end until we just capitulated. I was surprised that we got to where we did in the Europa League so early on under Unai Emery, but we did. But this season has been horrific. It's been absolutely horrendous. And when you look at Arsenal and you look at the side that we know that we've got arguably the hottest winger from last season. We've got a Ballon d'Or nominee at striker. We've got Lacazette, who's a £50 million bruiser of a player that is brilliant at holding the ball up, bringing other players into play, and cost a hell of a lot of money and had a fantastic scoring record in France. We've got Mesut Ozil, who on his day can be the best number 10 in the world, apparently. But we know whether or not you're going to take the mick or whether or not what side you sit on, whether you don't think he's very good or you do. We know that he has the ability to be very creative if he's under the right system. We know that we've bought Torreira, who was a really fantastic defensive-minded midfielder at Sampdoria and has played there several times for the international team of Uruguay, and yet we're not playing him there. We've brought one of the hottest left-back prospects in Kieran Tierney, and we've got Hector Bellerin coming back from injury, who we know can easily be up there with the top right-sided fullbacks in the league. And then you've got the centre-backs where you have invested nearly £25 million in 2. I know that doesn't seem like a lot, but 2 experienced centre-backs that shouldn't make the mistakes that they do week in, week out. We've got some really exciting youth players like Rob Holding, like Joe Willett, like Martinelli, like Reece Nelson, like Guendouzi. And yet we are seemingly still struggling to create a team or field a side that shows any sort of verve, any sort of fun, any sort of guile. And what you've got there is the most glaring big L on our team, which is telling us to change things. And bringing in Mourinho is not the answer. Ashford says, if we're bringing in Mourinho, how would you feel? I would feel like we have made the biggest mistake ever. How can you sit here? Right, I don't feel it's coming like I'm attacking people now. But how can you sit there and be annoyed at what you're seeing with Emery and think, oh, hey, you know what's a great idea? Let's go out and get the man who lost the dressing room at Manchester United, that was belittled for parking the bus and inventing the term. How can you think that that is a good idea? Saying that Mourinho has won plenty of trophies, has done really well. When did that happen? How did he do that at Manchester United? He won the Europa League there. Whoop-de-doo. We got to the Europa League final and we blew it with this manager. Do we want to win the Europa League? No. We want to get back into the Champions League. Yes, I know it's a route how to do that, but it's not what we need from a manager. We signed the man who won 3 in a row, and yet somehow we're still not winning it. I mean, the idea of bringing in Mourinho is a cop-out. The idea of bringing in Mourinho is the biggest load of rubbish. Thankfully, it's the one thing that I have faith in the board not doing, is bringing in Mourinho, because I don't get how you can sit there. And there has been, I've watched a couple of videos of people sitting there saying that, oh yeah, Mourinho would change things. Well, it's a load of rubbish, because he might have an initial impact, but he's the same people that are saying that we should bring in Mourinho are the same people that moaned about Arsene Wenger being past it and being out of his time. Well, if there's any manager that's still around looking for a job right now that is past it, or has not moved on, or has not moved with the times, and is still very loyal to his own system, even though it doesn't work in modern football, it's Jose Mourinho. So how on earth can anyone think that Jose Mourinho is the right choice to take over Arsenal, a side that, under a fan base that was belittled by this man and called our greatest ever manager a specialist in failure? I just don't understand how you can get that desperate to be that wanting of Jose Mourinho. Now, this is all opinion. You have to understand that if you want Mourinho in, that is your opinion. And my opinion is that I think it's ridiculous. But that, obviously, I'm never going to turn around and say that you can't have your opinion on that, because that's what we're here for, to discuss. But now you have my opinion. People hate it when I sit on the fence. I'm certainly not doing that now, am I? Kofi says, Ten Hag from Ajax. So does Beanhead. Evening, Peter. I think that Ten Hag would be a really interesting choice. Obviously, things didn't go too well last night at Stamford Bridge, especially after they lost 2 players. But you could argue that actually before that point, that little 5 minutes of madness, they were going quite well, going 4-1 up against Chelsea. Fantastic record in the Champions League last season. Works really well with youth players. Clearly got a very strong passion when he's on the sidelines. Yes. You should also note that we are going to be doing a new tactical breakdown series. Those that enjoyed the tactical breakdowns we did over the summer looking at players, we are going to be doing some tactical breakdowns of managers that could possibly replace Unai Emery or take over it in the season after. Hopefully Ljungberg takes the reins for a bit. And I'm going to be joined by the other Bundesliga podcast to look at Marco Rose, who, of course, was manager of Red Bull Salzburg, is now manager of Borussia Mönchengladbach, and has been tipped as possibly someone that we should look at. So the first episode of the managerial tactical breakdown, rather, is going to be Marco Rose. We're going to have a look at him, but we're going to be looking at lots of different managers. So if you've got some ideas or you've got some suggestions for who we should look at, people I should talk to, please recommend some people you think I should talk to about certain managers, and I'll do my best to get them on. But Marco Rose is going to be the first one with Tom from the other Bundesliga podcast. So that should be interesting. Let's get some more of your comments before we go anywhere. Archie says, give it to Freddie. Kofi says, Rodgers. Why would you leave Leicester right now for Arsenal? It doesn't even look like a step up at this point in time. Peace says, what would you think if we appointed Luis Enrique or Allegri? They're 2 very different managers. I don't know what Luis Enrique's sort of state of mind is right now. It's obviously a horrible thing that happened to him. I don't know what his situation is. I don't know if he'd be the right man to take over or not. Obviously, under Spain, he didn't really ever get tested, because the thing that happened to him happened so early on in his time at Spain that we never really got to see a test of that side. Things did go a bit stale at Barcelona, but he did some really good things at Celta Vigo as well. So there's experience there. I'm not sure if he'd be the person that I'd pick. And Allegri, I mean, he was on the list of people to replace Arsene Wenger and he didn't get the job. So if that tells you anything about what we would see from Allegri in the future, I can't see that being the guy. And Melly says, Nuno Nagelsmann. Nagelsmann looks good, but again, he's only just taken over at RB Leipzig. He's got a long-term deal. I don't see that happening. Nuno Espirito Santo at Wolves is It's a bit of an odd one. I think that Nuno is one of those where he really suits the club that he's at in Wolves. I'm not sure that he would suit. If you would happily tell me what his style is, because I still think the style that he's playing and what he's got from Wolves is very much down to the personnel that he has in that team rather than the actual system. At Valencia, when he was there, he declined rather rapidly, especially when Peter Lim was there. So who knows? I'm not too keen on Nuno as a manager. James says, I'd take Arteta. He knows Pep's tactics, has learned loads, and would play good balanced football. What are your thoughts? I thought that Arteta was probably the most likely one other than Unai Emery to take over when the choice was made. Would I take him? Everything about me, when we look at managers, makes me think I want someone with pedigree. I want someone with real experience, a genuine style that I've witnessed on the big stage. Arteta has none of those things. But he does have the experience of working with Pep Guardiola, who has all of those things and more. Is it a risk that's worth taking? Would it be better than what we've got right now? Arguably, the answers to both those questions are yes. If it happened, would I be disappointed? No. Would I be excited? Probably, to see Arteta take over at Arsenal. But will it happen is another thing. Wilson says, I think there is an overreaction on the Vitoria result because Arsenal are already through. I don't think it's an overreaction, Wilson. I think it's more down to the fact that people are a bit bored and fed up with the same old thing that we're seeing week in, week out. Tekos Man says, Arteta is a disaster waiting to happen. He's not keen. Kamal says, Eddie Howe. Eddie Howe doesn't really fill me with... He's just sort of that guy that was there that brought Bournemouth up to the Prem and has kept him there. Hasn't really, I don't know, it just doesn't inspire me, Eddie Howe, to be that person. Ashwin Watkins says Frank Rijkaard. Wow, we are going into the doldrums. I'm not sure. Ross Morgan says Pellegrini. Again, no, not someone that I would go for. Gary Hardy says we don't know what to expect with this board. Under the last regime, we would have seen Emery get a contract extension in the summer. And actually, they were already talking about him getting a contract extension before the end of last season. So, I mean, yeah. Ashwin says, Vieira, I'm looking forward to those videos. Yeah, Vieira is definitely going to be someone that we're going to try and look at. I'm going to get Jeremy Smith, fingers crossed, back on to talk about Vieira. So look forward to doing that one. Kamal says that he would give Eddie Howe a chance. He's Premier League proven, plays good attacking football and gets most from the players, and he speaks English as a plus. Imagine that. The whole English thing, I think, is actually quite underrated. We've seen, I don't know if that's just because Emery has struggled so much with communication, but I feel like the English barrier is actually something that's quite important to this team. Selkos Man with the best suggestion of the evening in Sam Allardyce, fair play. Gershwin says possibly Rafa Benitez as a choice. Again, something that maybe to the end of the season I would get behind. James Rose says it's a shame that no ex-player is doing very well as a manager. Vieira is struggling at Nice and Henry bombed at Monaco. Very, very true. Abram says we missed a trick with Benitez. Definitely would have improved us, sorry. Sailor V says, Freddie, as a caretaker, we would have options at the end of the season to search as well. I think the best way to sort of end what we're chatting about today is sort of say that we have to stick with the side, and we know that. We have to stick with what we're doing. We have to continue supporting this team. I'm always going to produce these content. I'm always going to watch Arsenal week in, week out. Nothing's going to stop me from doing that. It might stop me from going to the games as much, but I'm never going to stop watching the Arsenal. We have to stick with this team. That doesn't mean sending out abusive messages after the games. I can sit here and I can be as frustrated as physically possible, and physically you can see how frustrated and how drained I am by watching this Arsenal side. But it's not bringing me to the point of abuse, and I would never recommend any of you do that. But what we need to continue doing is to try and be objective, is to have these discussions, keep talking, keep putting your thoughts out there, because it's very, very clear that the club do listen to the fan voices in some sense. It may not always be coming across in the way that we want it to, but I think there's definitely enough people there that get the feeling of the fan frustration and the fan feelings about certain topics. That's why we saw Arsene Wenger's time come to an end. It's possibly even why we saw Granit Xhaka's captaincy come to an end. And that's a completely different podcast, all the different. So that's sort of where I would end things off for today. I think that we've covered a lot. And I think that ultimately this has been a nice bit of therapy for everyone. So I really, really appreciate you tuning in. If you've enjoyed the show, please give it a like. Please subscribe to the channel if you're new. Turn those notifications on. So I say we're going to be dropping some videos over the next week or so. The Eyes of the Opposition is going to be with Rob Tanner, who writes for The Athletic, which if you don't read or subscribe to, please do. The Athletic is an absolutely fantastic site. So Rob Tanner, who is the Leicester correspondent for The Athletic, is going to be with us to discuss and preview the Arsenal-Leicester game at King Power Stadium. And then we're going to have Tom from the other Bundesliga podcast to talk about Marco Rose as possibly someone who could take over the reins after Emery is hopefully, finally, relieved of his duties. Thank you ever so much for tuning in. I'll see you again very, very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.